Well, thank you everyone for joining us here today. I know myself and the other seniors worked really hard on all these projects, so thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and join us, both virtually and in person. My name's Ginger McCormick, and today I'll be presenting What Would Woolly Do? An integrated communications and marketing campaign to encourage Gen Z and Gen Alpha to use resources at the Woodrow Wilson Presidential Library. A mouthful, I know, but let's get into it. So why do I care so much about museums is probably one of the biggest questions, because we're here for a marketing presentation. So when I was a little kid, my mom used to let me and my siblings kind of ditch school for the day, and she'd take us on field trips to museums. And I always felt that I learned more from those experiences, and they really shaped who I am today. So here's some photos of some of my favorite museums that we've attended. But that's really what's kind of gotten me into going and doing my internship at the Woodrow Wilson Library and wanting to continue to look at why younger people aren't really getting involved currently with museums. So here's a little bit of background about the organization itself. So historically, the manse itself was built in 1846, and it wasn't until 1856 that Woodrow Wilson was born in the home. So there's a little bit of a difference. And then in 1912, we have one of my favorite parts of history for the manse itself is Woodrow Wilson's presidential visit. This was before he actually took office. And this is, all of downtown was kind of decorated still for Christmas, and it was a really big part of kind of also Mary Baldwin history, because this is the time when Woodrow Wilson came and spoke on campus, which I think is really cool. And then later on, we have kind of the more of the organization's history itself. We can see that his second wife, Edith, bought the area, and then in the 90s, the museum itself opened up. So it's still fairly new, but has a very long history. So you've probably been seeing this little sheep on all my slides and wondering, who is Woolly? So during World War I, there were sheep on the presidential lawn as kind of an effort to not only get people more kind of encouraged, and the newspapers kind of took it as a joke, but the American people really found these sheep and loved them. So they sheared some of the sheep and auctioned off their wool as a part of a fundraiser for the Red Cross. And now we have Woolly today, who's a mascot for the education department. He has his own YouTube page of Sheep on the Loose, and he goes around on all of our different social media and has his own adventures today. But Woolly is one of my personal favorite parts of getting to be a part of the Woodrow Wilson Museum and seeing all of what he does. So what does this have to do with marketing? So if we look at this survey, you can see that the biggest percentage of people who are visiting the museum currently are baby boomers. That takes about 67, which is way over the majority. And then if we look at this little slice up here, only 2% is Gen Z. So Gen Z is kind of the younger people sitting in the room right now. The highest end of Gen Z is around 25 years old, and the youngest is still kind of in high school. But then we also have Gen Alpha that's coming up. So these are the kids that are the iPad generation and are at home, and they kind of were hit most in education from the pandemic. So these are kind of two groups that we really need to be marketing to and encouraging to continue their education outside of just your typical school day. So what's a great way to get these kids more educated? Museums and libraries. And so how do we do that? We have Mary Baldwin right across the street. So I timed it the other day, from King Dorm all the way over to Woodrow Wilson is a 6-minute walk. But only 2% of Mary Baldwin students, or only 20% of Mary Baldwin students have actually gone and visited the campus, which seems like a pretty big disconnect to me. Seeing as there's such a big chunk of students who aren't visiting and it's so close, but then when we do have college students visiting, it's students from JMU and UVA, when it's just across the road and we could be using these resources and kind of making a connection with the two campuses. So how do we do this? Programming, my favorite part of the presentation. So my first one is Woodrow Wilson's Cabinet of Curiosities. So in 2013, I was a part of my local library's teen advisory board. Here's some photos of us doing Pokemon, different window art, making mazes, meeting authors, and it was a really great experience and what got me really into wanting to go into library work. I did this from when I was 13 all the way up until I graduated high school. And this was a really great experience. So why don't we do it here at Woodrow Wilson? During my survey of students here at Mary Baldwin, we found that 45% of students would be interested. While that might seem a little kind of wonky and not the biggest percentage, we don't need every student to want to be a part of this board. We want the leaders to be joining it, and the leaders here on both campus and on kind of the high school campuses around. So college students, especially like freshmen, people who don't know if they want to go into this career, this is a great way for them to learn about it and get involved. So here's some little etch-ups of what I would put for the cabinet. I think it's a pretty fun play on words since it's a presidential library. Another one, the most voted by the students who did my survey, was a community garden. So behind the manse, there's a very large garden. It's one of my favorite parts, and it gets used quite a lot, from things from Harry Potter to the gingerbread coming up. But a lot of students want that more of connection to community, and so a great way by doing this is a community garden, or even partnering with the community garden that's already established here in Stanton. Another great way would be educator outreach. So the organization of Woodrow Wilson reaching out to the history department, the anthropology department, and making those connections with those professors, because those are the first line from academic to the student. So if they're getting kind of encouraged to go do an internship or go visit, then they're more likely to go and attend. If you're getting extra credit, you're probably going to get off campus and go try something new. Another fun one would be on-campus events. So Mary Baldwin students tend to not really want to leave campus from my research so far. So what I've kind of put together is a different array of on-campus events. Everything from a panel discussing what it's like to work in the library world or the museum world, or talking about Woodrow Wilson's history. So when I was asking students, why aren't you going and visiting the Woodrow Wilson Library, one of the biggest concerns was Woodrow Wilson's history. Since our campus is so diverse and has a lot of kind of ideas and thoughts when it comes to social justice, a lot of students really find it hard to want to learn more about Woodrow Wilson given his past. So what's a great way? Opening up the discussion and talking about it with these students who have these concerns. Because if they are aware and know that the organization of Woodrow Wilson's library already is aware of these and want to make a change, then more students would be willing to go over and visit. My personal favorite would be a time capsule. So when I was a little kid in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in 2005, they opened up one where students wrote about what they thought the future would be like. So this would be a fun way for students to get involved and feel like they're a part of history while also visiting the campus. And then you've been flocked. So this is a fundraiser. So when I was in speech and debate in high school, we had this where students would go put flamingos on the lawns of different kind of houses, and you would pay a fee to put the flamingos there, and the person who has the house would pay a fee to get it removed. So with this, I want to use woolly because sheep already are in a flock. So you've been flocked, and this would be a fun way to kind of market outside of where we typically market. You'd have people seeing the signs throughout their neighborhood, and it's a great way to also get involved with the community. Then people would be seeing it more often, and you could also work with a printer kind of in Stanton who wants to get their art out. One of my favorite parts of the Woodrow Wilson Library is the Pierce Arrow. So currently there's the Pierce Arrow Committee, and they kind of do all the upkeep for it. But as we saw, a majority of the people who are visiting are in the baby boomer bracket, and a majority of those members are in the baby boomer bracket. So if we got younger people who are interested in mechanics to get a kind of mentorship program where they get to work on such an amazing historical car and find out if they actually want to be a mechanic while they're in high school, they'll encourage more students to go into trade, which is one of the biggest things that we're seeing that Gen Z needs to be involved in, is going to trade schools. So if we kind of get that going and get more students involved in that, it would not only get students to visit Woodrow Wilson, but see that there's other ways to get involved and be academic outside of just your typical college experience. And then during my research, I contacted a handful of presidential libraries, and the LBJ library does this program where they teach students how to make cocktails, and then they talk about different political views or different kind of campaigns. So here we have drinks and discussions. So these are just some mock-ups of ones I would have out in the community, because here in the Shenandoah Valley, we have a lot of different breweries and places like that. My personal favorite would be partnering with the Visual Art Theater and talking about Woodrow Wilson in the movies. So different ways to get kind of grad students and older Gen Z involved in the conversation. A part of this could also be a book club. So seeing as a library has tons of books, why not get people to talk about those books? And that's not something I typically see, at least here on campus. And then my favorite one for social media would be a day in a life. So for example, Andrew, you'd go kind of through archives and show what it's like to be an archivist and what goes into condition reportings and kind of the behind the scenes tour without going full into detail, and it's a free way to market. So this is my timeline. It would be a little under a year for the whole marketing program itself, and I would begin with the Flock fundraiser to make the money to use for, say, the drinks and discussion and buying those resources. So thank you guys for listening to me. I really enjoyed making this project and being a part of the Woodrow Wilson Library. Are there any questions?
Hired.
So, thank you guys. Whoever wants to go next.